All right, Crim 28. Let's knock out the final chapter of the semester, chapter 14, which is called Bringing It All Together, Practical Solutions for Community-Based Corrections. So this is one of those PowerPoint presentations that is, I think it seems like it's longer than the whole freaking chapter. So some of it I'm going to kind of skim over because a lot of it I think we've talked about. Anyways, there it is, chapter 14, Bringing It All Together, Solutions for Community-Based Corrections. So we already know, I'm going to skip, I always skip over those, you know that. We already know what community-based corrections are. Those are correctional programs that are based in the community, right? Okay. So that means that we are providing services for correctional supervision that is not behind correctional walls, like not in jail and not in prison. So what is the ultimate goal of community corrections? To get people to stop committing crime, right? Desistance, to get them to stop committing crime. So there are a lot of different things that happen in people's lives that get them to ultimately stop committing crime. Sometimes that desistance means that the person died. Some people will commit crime until the day they die, and that's just the way it is. Some people will stop committing crime. Their criminal career will desist because they're locked up. Some of them, something will happen in their life and that switch will go off and they will just decide, this is it, I'm done. That could be having a family. That could be losing a loved one. It could be getting a great job. It could be falling in love. It could be, there's a bunch of different things that could happen. But typically, people aren't going to stop committing crimes until they want to. And sometimes that's a gradual process, and sometimes it's that the trigger, there's something that goes off in their mind that makes them stop. So desistance is really what we're trying to do. That's the ultimate goal of community corrections. And these are the objectives of desistance. Rehabilitate, obviously, we try and get them to fix the problem. You know, again, talking about rehabilitation, if you have, you know, torn your ACL and you had ACL surgery, your knee, and you go through rehab at your physical therapist, ultimately you're trying to fix the problem. You're trying to get that knee stronger again so that you can go back to normal. Same kind of concept. We're trying to fix the problem. We also want to protect the community when you are dealing with community corrections, and you want to restore the victim, offender, and community. So these are types of things, root problems that we're trying to correct. Drug and alcohol addiction, lack of emotional control. Yes, there are people, obviously, recently, and I'm recording this video in December of 2000. I probably shouldn't say that because I'm probably going to use these videos for quite some time, but December of 2000. So recently, just today, I saw on the news a high school football player who got ejected from a football game, and he basically just hauls off, runs onto the football field, and tackles the official. Okay, lack of emotional control. So what we want to do is correct that problem in offenders, problems like that. There's some other things that we want them to work on. If people are educated and working, they're much less likely to commit crimes. So we want to help with all this stuff. We also want them to be good parents so that their children don't become criminals. So these are all things that are part of the correctional goals. If they have mental illness or developmental disabilities, we want to stabilize all that stuff too so that they will be less likely to commit crime. Okay? The timing of treatment must be right. When the offender is ready to change, they're going to change. If they're not ready to change, you as a probation officer or parole agent can bang your head against the wall as much as you want to, and they're not going to change. And that's the hard part, because no matter how much you want it for someone, it's really hard to make someone want to change. I mean, ultimately, you probably can't make someone want to change. And it's a very frustrating part of the work. When they're ready, you can be such a resource, and you can help them incredibly. When they're not ready, you can try all you want, and it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. So these are some programs that help with reducing recidivism. And I know we've talked about recidivism before, but recidivism is when an offender completes a correctional program and then reoffends. Okay? I'm probably going to kind of skip through some of this stuff because number one, I don't really see this significantly in the book. It might be a page in the book, and it's, anyways. So they do talk about evidence-based programs. When we talk about evidence-based programs, we're talking about just that, programs that have been studied and have been researched and have actually shown proof that they work. And I know that we've talked about this before as well, earlier in the class. Evidence-based principles are what are basically driving most probation and parole agencies right now. So if there is a program out there that is not backed by evidence right now, it's not being used very likely. Very common right now, risk needs assessments. Every time an offender is at any step in the criminal justice system, someone is evaluating that offender to see what their risk level is, how likely are they to reoffend, and what are their needs at all levels. I don't know if you see this. At all levels: diversion, sentencing, probation sentencing, re-entry. Can you imagine how much time that takes? These risk needs assessments are very in-depth questionnaires that are completed very regularly. I can tell you how much time this takes. Way too much. As a probation officer, having to update these and reassess your offenders every 3 to 6 months is ridiculously overwhelming. Imagine you're supervising 100 offenders. And for the adult world, that's a small number. It doesn't seem like a small number, but I will be honest with you. If you work for the Fresno County Probation Department and you have 100 offenders on your caseload, you're lucky. That's a small caseload. Imagine trying to assess each of your offenders, let's say every 6 months. That's a lot of work. When are you trying to counsel them? When are you actually supervising them? When are you doing surprise visits? When are you drug testing them? When are you doing searches? When are you arresting them? You're spending all your time doing risk needs assessments and very little time doing anything else. So what I'm telling you right now makes it sound negative. And I'm not trying to sound negative. I'm trying to sound realistic. But the risk needs assessments are very important. But I can tell you it's very difficult to keep up with these when you're trying to do about a million other things. There are caseloads within the Fresno County Probation Department where probation officers might have up to 1,000 probationers on their caseload. It's nearly impossible to do these needs assessments at all of these different points during their supervision. And this Ohio assessment is the one that's recommended. Every agency probably uses a different one. They probably use whichever one is cheapest or whichever one they are contracted with. So, again, let me go back here real quick. You need to reassess your offenders' needs and risk assessment at all levels. And in order for their supervision to be effective, you need to do all this stuff. Consistently supervise them, unannounced visits, and let them know in advance what the consequences are. Progressive and graduated sanctions. So, and I'm going to kind of skip that one out. Again, how much work does this seem like? Maybe it doesn't seem this overwhelming, but consistent supervision, unannounced visits, making sure that you're providing graduated consequences, letting them know in advance what those consequences are going to be. You have to come up with some pretty clever ideas with sanctions, because you can't typically arrest offenders for a lot of the technical violations. And I know I mentioned this in one of the discussion questions. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when your offenders are testing dirty and there's no bed space? You can't arrest them. What kind of sanctions are you going to impose? You have to become clever and come up with ideas so that you can impose sanctions that impose consequences, but they do not require custody time, because there's no space in the jail or the prison or the juvenile hall or whatever the facility is. So again, I know I'm making this sound kind of negative, but I need to make sure that you understand that there's a lot more to this than, oh, he tested dirty, I'm going to go take him to jail now. That's not necessarily how it works. So it's very difficult. They've got to do quite a bit in order for you to be able to take them to jail or put them in custody. I'm going to kind of skip over that. Coming up with ideas I'm going to skip this one too. You know what? I better not. Okay. So, what I want to talk about in this one specifically, motivational interviewing. Gives praise and encouragement for desirable behavior. Okay. Whew. This is also pretty tough. You have offenders who will come into your office, and if they didn't test dirty, there are programs now where you will be required to give them things like gift cards for not testing dirty. And some of you are like, wait, what? And some of you are like, well, that's a great idea. Okay, it does become, it's challenging. It becomes really difficult because, you know, I'm not getting a gift card. I've been doing the right thing all along. So have all of you guys. Nobody's giving you a gift card or a pat on the back for doing the right thing. But we sometimes do give offenders extra just for doing what they're supposed to do. Does that make sense? So that's all part of this whole evidence-based practices, motivational interviewing, encouraging the desirable behavior, positive reinforcement. This is kind of the new style of probation and parole community supervision. So again, kind of stuff that you have to think about. Anyway, so go ahead and read that part in the book. Yeah, I'm going to kind of skip through this. But we do risk factors that are pretty strong indicators of an offender being pretty likely to reoffend. Criminal identity, meaning, you know, that I would ask this question a lot of my younger offenders. Where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And if they said, I see myself in jail or prison or dead, that criminal identity was pretty strong in that offender. And it was pretty likely that that offender was going to reoffend. And their criminal identity was pretty strong even at a young age. You know, if I said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And they said in college, their criminal identity wasn't real strong. So that was a good thing. It made me think that, okay, this person doesn't necessarily see themselves as a criminal. So that's what we mean when we're talking about the criminal identity. Having antisocial personality disorder clearly could make someone more likely to reoffend. Early and persistent involvement in law-breaking behavior. I think we've mentioned this before, but the younger one is when they commit their first law violation, the more likely they are to continue in unlawful behavior. Significant others and close associates that are antisocial. If the whole household and all your friends are criminals, you are more likely to be a criminal too. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to, but it makes you more likely. If you don't have at least one person who's there to support you and be there for you, you're more likely to continue to offend. Alcohol and drug use, of course, low levels of school or employment, performance, and then lack of legitimate interest in hobbies or recreational pursuits. Also, if there's not a whole lot of help for offenders who are in prison that are getting out or prep for re-entry, they're a lot more likely to reoffend. And if they are not maintaining contact with their family while they're in, they're more likely to reoffend. If they don't have a solid living arrangement, job leads, all that kind of stuff, when they're in, they're more likely to reoffend. If they don't have an action plan, some kind of plan in place, they're more likely to reoffend. And think things like AB 109. When AB 109 was put into place, the California Department of Corrections was tasked with releasing thousands of inmates in a very short period of time. As you can imagine, people didn't have time to provide them with really solid re-entry plans. So those offenders were immediately at higher risk for recidivism because there simply wasn't time to prepare them for re-entry. They had to get out as soon as possible because of the Supreme Court ruling in the case Plata versus Brown, where the Supreme Court ordered that California had to release a certain number of inmates, and it was thousands of inmates. So preparing for reentry for parole is extremely important. Another thing that supervision officers must do: continuously confront the offender for the undesirable behavior and carry out consequences. If you have 1,000 probationers or parolees on your caseload, how reasonable is this? If I have 1,000 people on my caseload, is it really reasonable that I'm able to contact every single one of them every time they do something? It's just not. Most offenders on community supervision do commit technical violations. And, you know, a lot of these are going to be drug offenses, positive drug tests. Where are we going here? Okay. Response to technical violations. I'm sorry that I don't mean to be... Technical violations should be swift, consistent, and fairly applied. When you have 1,000, 500, 100 offenders on your caseload, this is very difficult to do. This is all in a perfect world. This is exactly what should happen, and it would be so amazing if this could happen. Sanctions should be graduated according to the violation, risk score, and levels of cooperation. Restorative solutions. We've talked about restorative justice. These are it would be great if the community could be involved. Restorative justice is definitely something that is really effective for lower level offenses, nonviolent offenses, first-time offenders. These are some examples of those types of programs. I think there we go. We always want to reinvest in our communities. And, okay, this is what we wanted to get to. Restoring former offenders. Okay, so we're talking about basically trying to get former offenders back into the community by way of sealing their record, pardoning them, getting their records expunged, all that kind of stuff. So your book does give you some pretty specific definitions about all of those things. A pardon, you probably heard of a pardon before. The president does federal crimes, governors does the state. There's different types of pardons, absolute, conditional, oops. So you can see all those. I'm not going to read it to you. I know you can do that. Expungement. Again, I'm not going to read that to you. I did these juvenile probation. I did these at Fresno County probation. It just so happened that I got assigned the juvenile record sealings / expungements. In the juvenile world, a lot of people would ask these questions. So if any of you ever had a little run-in as a juvenile, I would, if it was in Fresno County, I would strongly suggest that you go down to the Fresno County Probation Department or call them and request to have your juvenile records sealed. It does not automatically get sealed, or it didn't used to. I think a lot of people think that it did, and then they go apply for law enforcement jobs and they find out, oh shoot, it does not automatically get sealed. You actually have to go through a process to get that done. So, and certain types of offenses are not sealable. So in California, at least, those are strikeable offenses. So anyways, here's some info about sealing. Now, adult records in California, we do something called, I think it's called expungement as well. It's Penal Code Section 1203.4. I like to call it forgiven but not forgotten. You can request that you basically have your records sealed, but it doesn't exactly go away. You can still see it, although you're given relief for that offense by the judge. Are juvenile records confidential? Yes and no. Typically, when you apply for a job, you're going to waive your rights so that they can look and see if you have had a juvenile contacts. When you have your fingerprints run and do that live scan through DOJ, the Department of Justice, your juvenile records typically do come up, or it will say this person has a juvenile record. And again, if you had a juvenile record, I don't know this for a fact, but I would say if you are trying to enlist in the military or something like that, or work for the FBI, I would imagine they still have access to those records. I don't know that for a fact, but I would always say that if you had a juvenile record, I would absolutely positively still disclose it if I were going into a job interview or something. Say, hey, I got it sealed, but I had a such and such when I was 15 or whatever. But so former felons are being less stigmatized now. I think that in California, just during the most recent election, I think you can be on parole and vote now. I think it used to be once you had a felony on your record, you were done. I don't think that's the case anymore. A lot of people, some people do agree with that, some people don't. I think it's different in different states. And I think that's it. Done.